let's take a look now at the second part, which is really how to optimize your productivity for meaningful progress and results. And meaningful means whatever you decide it to be, right? So if we define progress, progress is moving towards a desired result, right? Desired state or desired result. And we say progress is a work in progress in the sense that, sometimes we mobilize so much to advance in something, to develop in something. And then we get sort of surprised when it's not a linear process, when it takes longer, when it has setbacks. So part of this is just accepting that the natural order of progress is that it's shifting. It's got its highs and lows, and that's completely normal. If we define productivity we define as achieving efficiency and effectiveness in fulfilling a desired objective or desired objectives. Effectiveness in this case is how well you fulfill the objective that you've set for yourself, and efficiency is doing it with the least resources, energy, time possible. Efficiency isn't always best, right? Sometimes you need to put in more time, more effort to get a more effective result, but it's definitely something to keep in mind when it comes to productivity. Because on the other hand, you don't want to be spending too much time doing tasks that at the end don't benefit you. So things to keep in mind about productivity. It's continuous. It's not absolute, just like progress, right? You're more productive some days than others. How you feel doing it is important. Again, as we said, just with motivation, as with productivity, is you could just be banging away a whole bunch of stuff, but at the end of the day, not feel much meaning behind it. And one size doesn't fit all. There are so many strategies, tools, concepts in the market about how to be more productive. And the idea is some may work for you, some may not. Some would work for another person. The key thing about productivity is understanding what helps you. It's also misleading, this idea of productivity. As we said, you can be checking off items, but feeling like you're not really progressing because maybe you're checking off items that at the end of the day don't contribute to the main things you're searching to do. Then it can happen the opposite. You may not be able to check off any items, but actually inside feel like you are making some very important progress. This weekend, while I still continue and try to do many things, I decided I didn't want to. But somehow I latched onto this wonderful book, Inner Gold by Robert Johnson, and couldn't get enough of it. And so probably it was the only thing on my list that I can say I really did. But I had a massive sense of epiphany, inspiration, renewal from just this one item, right? Growth. So it can go either way. Sometimes as well, there are many more things that you're doing that you realize. People say, oh gosh, I feel like I'm running around all day, but what do I do? And in some cases, maybe you're spending a lot of time doing things that don't matter, but in other cases, you're doing more than you appreciate. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The major myth is that the more time, the more effort, the more stress, pressure you put in, the better the results, the better the quality of the work. And that's not necessarily true. Sometimes if you force yourself to do something at a time when energy is low and concentration is low, you can, do it for 4 times as many hours and get a worse result than if you do it at your peak moment the next day, perhaps, and you may end up getting it done in, a quarter of the time. So this idea of it's not just about working hard. Working hard is important to a degree. It's also very much about working smart, and that's what working smart means. So energy and concentration, we always, when we talk about this, we say, think about it, energy and concentration on one side and activity on the other. The more activity that you do, the less energy and concentration you have, because resources get spent, right? And they're limited. They're limited for a good reason, right? Because deep progress requires resources, requires energy and focus. And we're not supposed to be robots with unlimited resources to give. That means that when we say yes to something, we have to say no to other things. And that is a choice that if one is really searching for quality productivity, for quality growth, that's a choice one needs to be able to make. It's a tough one. And we often see people saying, I'm so excited and so inspired by so many things, I want to do it all. But the problem with that is then we end up doing a little bit of everything and not actually getting any meaningful progress, change, growth in any one area. So this is when we say sometimes we have to decide, what are our priorities? What are our priorities? And that means that I will either not do certain things or I will just be okay with doing less of them. So structures like tools, apps, lists, etc., help us track and learn. They help us pivot and adjust our productivity, and they're valuable for that. However, if you just lean on those, it's not sufficient, right? It's also important to have and check in with this kind of internal clarity around the growth that you're having. And so the idea is, having these sort of qualitative check-ins and also having ways of, lists and calendars, et cetera, things that help take information out of your head, clear up space, but then as well, make it that much more easier to act on those things. Those are very quality and important as well. So our model when it comes to productivity has 4 major areas. The first is organization. Organization simply means in our world being able to capture everything that lies in your universe of responsibilities. And this is really important because a lot of the time when people come to us with difficulties around productivity, what we find is that they are only focusing on things they want to get done, and they're not taking into account all the other responsibilities, regular tasks and obligations they have, and they expend energy, time, and effort in doing. And so when these are unaccounted for, it's very hard for us to find ways to optimize their productivity with everything going on. So organization is about really getting a full and detailed scope of everything that you have to do, right, in any one moment. Prioritization is then within that universe, finding ways to prioritize. And that means having clear criteria. And again, we keep saying the why of why you choose one project or one subtask as more important than another. Productivity is the third area of this entire model of ours. And this is where we're really talking about the tools that help, right? Tools that help you. And we're going to go through some of them, really get the most out of the time and energy that you have. And measurement is, again, as we said, it's about checking in. It's qualitative and quantitative check-ins to see how are you progressing. And it's important to have both, right? This doesn't mean that one has to have a huge experimental setup, tracking progress on a regular basis, but having a few ways to see, both through numbers, but also through simple talks with yourself or with a coach or with whomever, a friend, of where things stand, is the most powerful. So the question then when it comes to productivity is, what progress is truly relevant and meaningful for you right now? And in that respect, the objective is to keep moving forward in positive ways that bring you a sense of meaning, fulfillment, and joy right now. And these are not just words. The idea is, again, each person has to define for what that means right now and really, really start to challenge the pressures that don't need to be there, because there are plenty of pressures that have to be there whether we like it or not. And so the idea is to eliminate the ones that don't. Alan Watts, wonderful philosopher, said, hurrying and delaying are alike ways of trying to resist the present. And so when we're constantly rushing, and you've heard me talk about this, especially from the first part in the morning, not only does this greatly increase our stress hormones, thereby making it much more difficult to relax throughout the day, but it also it causes more mistakes, causes more confusion, and prevents us being able to actually enjoy what we're doing. On the other hand, delaying, constantly procrastinating, avoiding the things that are the most important causes us all sorts of strife and stress as well, because these things then grow in our heads and they prevent us from being able to enjoy the present moment. So I thought his quote was particularly apt here. What can you do in that respect to optimize your productivity? As we said, get real about those priorities. Get real, write them down, and say no to stuff. Again, this is so hard, but once you get started, it gets a lot easier, and it becomes sometimes even fun. Understand how you work. We keep saying this is not a one-size-fits-all, which means that, each person has preferences, has blocks around energy and concentration. I'm a morning person. I can do most of my more detailed tasks in the morning, but creative tasks I tend to do more in the afternoons. Past a certain hour, I can't work anymore, though I may get ideas in the middle of the night, right? If I want to do something creative, it's better to take a walk than just stare in front of a screen. That's how I work, right? There are other people who need particular things in nutrition. We all do, in fact, but maybe they have certain things they've seen that work for them. So understanding particularly when concentration and energy are at a low or a high for you, what saps it, what encourages it, all these things will help you understand how to build a life to the degree that you can, build your day-to-day in the way that you can, that can work for you in the most powerful way possible, right? Other things, again, as always, identify people, tools that can help you with productivity, structures, influences. But there are three here that can help almost anyone. The first is the 80-20 rule. And in this respect, we're talking about the idea that 80% of the things that many of us are doing on average only contribute about 20% to the effectiveness of the results that we're looking for. And yet there's this 20% of work that we're doing that actually contributes 80% of the results and effectiveness that we're searching for. And so this is key here. The idea then is to ask oneself, what is this glorious 20% that is so powerful and impactful for what I'm looking to get done? And how do I expand that to more than 20%, right? How do I spend most of my time doing the stuff that actually is the most effective and impactful? You'll see this often in entrepreneurs, for example, who may spend 80% of their time, creating a new website, but, complaining that they're not getting clients. And then they find that, when they spend those few 20% going to an event or picking up the phone or connecting with people, suddenly that's what gets them the new opportunities. And so the idea for them is less time designing things in the back end, more time connecting with folks, for example. The second rule that almost works for everybody, I'd say, is the rule of three, which just means that in any one moment, during a day, during the week, a season, a month, whichever, you decide the top three things that you need to get done first, no matter what. And people will say, oh, but I have so many other things I have to get done. And I'll say, yeah, that's great, but really, 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 really focus on what are the first three things that have to get done. What this does is it helps us avoid procrastination. It helps us really hone in and take advantage of our energy and concentration at the best possible moments so that we can ensure that these three things get done first. And sometimes one of the three things is going to be something relatively small, but something that is eating away at you and that you need to get done first so you can unblock yourself, so to speak. And that's fine. You get to choose. The third major tool that we talk about all the time are mind maps and one-pagers. So anything that allows you within one page, and that page could be a very big page, to see your universe of something, whether that's your marketing strategy, whether that's your job search strategy, whether that's all the responsibilities you have for a particular project or things that are priorities for you right now. But instead of having to always dig through lists and complex documents, using sort of these one-pagers, and the more elaborate and the more beautiful and the more, self-tailored, the better. Again, look at the things that are stealing and draining your time and energy. But in this case, when it comes to productivity, we're really talking about routines that drain your energy. Maybe that's going to sleep too late all the time, or habits. Maybe you're drinking too much coffee and it's making you nuts, right? Situations. Again, this may have to do with people. It may have to do with particular work projects or collaborations you've agreed to. Dynamics, maybe there are dynamics in the home, dynamics with friendships. So things to keep in mind, again, that you can just sit and reflect on and say, really, what's working for me and what's not? And how do I make it work better for me? Avoid multitasking. It's much better to focus on something, as you've seen from my example, my pantless example. Small but consistent tasks are more effective than, doing one big task and then never doing it again. Yes, there are times that we have to kind of break through and maybe do one massive effort to make a big change. But most of the time, especially in times that are difficult, it can be more effective to just focus on small, consistent tasks over and over. Write down your achievements if you're feeling unproductive. We don't want people to badger themselves about their productivity, constantly checking lists. But if you're feeling like you're not getting anything done, and especially if you're starting to feel things like uselessness or hopelessness, then sit down and even write every little task that you've done at the end of the day, doing the dishes, taking a shower, taking care of the cat, whatever it is. But all these little things will show you that your day was filled up doing stuff that makes a difference. And remember that, look for also ways where you are achieving but not growing. And so again, you're filling up time doing stuff that doesn't really matter to you or doesn't really make a difference in your life. And understanding also that time off and rest is not a nice to have. It's not a luxury. It's actually the other half of productivity, right? This is when we recharge our batteries. This is when we get a new concept of things. This is when we process stuff subconsciously. So it's absolutely critical. It's not the nice to have additional auxiliary activity.